Most of you I know come and you watch my videos for my reptile care information. However, I have actually picked up the aquarium hobby again after being out of it for, I'd say, probably like over 8 years. I quit when I went to college just because nobody was really at home to take care of my tank. I've actually fully picked up this hobby in full swing, and there's a lot of things that I do now that I didn't used to do. And just to give you some background, I've been keeping fish since elementary school, obviously with my parents' help, and I very quickly learned a lot more about what I was doing and how to take care of the fish properly than my parents ever did. And if you're like me, then you've probably had it happen where you get so excited, you go to the pet store, you can finally bring fish home, and you know, you or maybe you're with your kids and you're picking out all these fish for your tank. And if you're like me, you might even have the poor pet store employee go chasing around that one exact molly that has the spots on it just right out of the tank of 20-some mollies. So I understand the disappointment when you get those fish and you're like, oh man, the tank looks great, it looks finished, you know, the fish are doing good, they're eating, they're swimming, they're entertaining the kids, whatever, and then in a couple of weeks or a few months, they just start dying. Or they start, they'll stop eating and then they die. And it's frustrating to have that continually happen over and over again. And I do understand that. And I have since learned some things that, like, reasons why that happens, things that people overlook, or things that add to this frustration, things that, you know, the pet store perhaps didn't explain to you very well when you got your first aquarium. There might be things that you're still confused on, or parts that you've never even heard of, that even though, yes, it's more work, it can save you a long, long time of frustrations and just trying to get things to work. So I decided I'd make a 3 or 4 part series on things that you can do to get your fish started off on a good note, to ensure that they're going to have a long, happy, and healthy life, so that you can have them around, a single fish around for, you know, 2-5 years. Isn't that exciting? You know, go to the pet store, buy, like a couple of goldfish and have them live for 5 to 10 some years. Wouldn't that be awesome? I think it's awesome. So I'm going to go over, in these different parts of this series, some different things that you can do to help increase the life expectancy of your fish. And some of this stuff is probably going to surprise you, honestly. Today's segment is about quarantining. I'm kind of blocking the tank here. It's about quarantining, and I have one quarantine tank in front of me. I have 2 up and running right now. You're going to see the other one in a different video this week. So I figured I'd show you the little one. I have better lighting in this room anyway right now. So I'm going to go over, like, what is important about quarantining, like why would you do it, how to set up a quarantine tank, and then various things of what I do during quarantine. And let me tell you, when I picked back up the hobby, I knew about quarantining. I knew why it was important. However, did I decide to do it? I was like, no, that's extra space and extra, you know, equipment running using electricity, and it's just so much extra work. I've never done it like that before, and I figured it out okay. So I didn't quarantine in the beginning, and let me tell you, that came back and it bit me in the rear end. I learned the hard way that I should quarantine. I introduced a disease on a, store-bought fish that looked healthy, put this fish in my tank, and introduced a disease to my tank of fish that were doing well and were healthy. And it took me way too long to spot it. I felt very stupid because I'm pretty versed on diseases. It took me a long time to figure out what was going on and to treat it properly. And by the time I had it under control, I lost half of the fish in my aquarium. And if you know anything about my aquarium, I haven't posted many videos yet because this happened, and my big tank, which is up here, is looking pretty pathetic because after this whole disease thing, I lost around $100 worth of fish. Let that sink in. $100 worth of fish. Dead, gone. Because I did not quarantine fish. So, quarantining is gonna save money, and it's gonna save the lives of your existing fish that you have that are doing well. So, like I said, I learned the hard way. I'd never done that before. And I can definitely recollect from the times of the kids, the number of times my tank's doing great, it's healthy, I decide to get, you know, a couple of neon tetras or a few more mollies or something to throw in there, or get the swordtail girlfriend, you know what I mean? Throw that in there, and, you know, 3 days later, the whole tank has ick. I'm sure even as a beginner, you've heard of ick, you know what ick is. And unfortunately, the medications to treat ick are they're hard on the fish, they're hard on the, you know, the natural balance, the natural ecosystem of your tank, and it also dyes everything in your aquarium blue permanently. So, you know, that lovely little rainbow rock that maybe your daughter or son picked out that's really pretty colors, yeah, it's now like a drab gray rainbowy color after that. So we're going to try to prevent quarantining. Basically is a way to spot a disease or a problem on a fish and give you a localized, small contained area to watch that fish and to treat that fish in without harming your good decorations. So you're going to put your crappy decorations and you don't care if they get screwed up in the quarantine tank. And I'm going to go over that, like what kind of things that I suggest for using in there. So it is very important. That's what it is important for. It's essentially what it is you're just setting up a spare tank. Just get something cheap off Craigslist, or use like a clear Rubbermaid storage container from Walmart or whatever. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It's just going to be a spare tank or container. Smaller is actually better. Smaller than your main tank is better, but not too small for the number and size fish you're putting in there, obviously. And it's just going to be simple, very simple, no substrate. It's actually best that you do not put any gravel or glass stones or sand or anything on the bottom of it. It is better just to leave that glass bare bottom. And then you're just going to put a few simple caves or plants for some hiding. Get a filter running your air pump like you normally would do, maybe a heater, depending on what you're putting on there. And every new fish that you bring into your house is going to go in that tank separate from all the healthy fish that you have in your pretty set up display tank. The new fish are going to go in there for 2 to 3 weeks. You're probably thinking, oh my god, that's such a long time. Trust me, it is worth it. So you're going to separate all the new fish in a small, simple, not even pretty setup in order to watch them. You want to make sure that they are healthy, that they don't develop any diseases a few days later. Because often a fish that looks healthy at the pet store, the stress of being moved can actually cause them to get sick. Because, let me tell you, at pet stores, ladies and gents, your fish has been exposed to some kind of illness. And the stress, it's like the common cold. You can, be exposed to the flu, but you may or may not catch it. It's the same way with fish. And the stress of being moved weakens their immune system and allows that disease to come forefront and actually show itself and bother your fish. So by putting all the new fish in a separate tank, you can see and find out if they're sick and treat them for it without having to worry about it spreading to the rest of your fish that are healthy, without having to worry that the medication is going to damage your live plant or any of your, pretty decorations that you probably spent a lot of money on. And it also is going to let you observe them to make sure that they are eating, because you don't want to put a fish that's not eating because it's still so nervous and scared into your regular size tank or big tank or whatever, where they have all of these tank mates. And if it's community tank, like my tank mates that they probably have never seen these type of fish before in their life, where they're going to be more scared and they're going to be more nervous in this bigger environment with all these other tank mates to get used to. You don't want to put a fish that's already nervous and not eating in that situation. Because if you do, chances are they're just plumb not going to eat and they're going to die from starvation. Versus in the quarantine tank, smaller area, there's less other fish around them for them to get used to. Chances are you're going to be able to get them eating a lot quicker. Make sure they're healthy. That's the bottom line about a quarantine tank. It's to separate them from your other fish until you know they're healthy, so that you are not potentially exposing the fish you know that you have that you know are healthy, making sure you're not exposing them to anything that could kill them. So that's why we quarantine. Very, very, very important. Like I said, because I didn't quarantine, I lost hundreds of dollars worth of fish. My entire tank gone. This is a 55-gallon above me. I know you can't see it, but you probably have some idea of what that is. I have 3 surviving fish in there. People come to my house, look at my tank, and go, is there even fish in here? Because I lost almost everything I had because I didn't quarantine my new fish. So I now quarantine. It is very important, and this is going to be my longest video, so you've probably already figured it out, because there is a lot of stuff to cover, and there's a lot of stuff I really need to stress. A lot of people, they haven't heard about quarantining, or they have, and they're just, they're like me. It's extra space, extra time, and why would I do it? But it's important. It's going to save you a lot of headache. Let me tell you, it is also a lot easier to find a dead fish in a quarantine tank to, scoop out with the net to return to the fish store than it is to find in your big tank with all your decorations and, more other fish that are going to eat it possibly before you can find it to return it back to the pet store to get your money back. So, like I said, I'm going to go over right now the basics of the tank, and then I'll go into what I do in the tank. This here is my quarantine tank. This is just a 5.5 gallon. It's nothing special. It's just what I had lying around. And this tank is going to be used for the smaller fish that I'm buying to stock my smaller tank. I have a bigger quarantine tank in the other room for the bigger fish that I'm getting to stock this big 55 gallon. So this isn't anything special. I personally recommend a 10 gallon. A 10-gallon aquarium will suffice for a good number of small fish if you want to get a big school of fish at one time, or a few larger fish at one time, so it's much more versatile. So I personally suggest a 10-gallon. A 5.5 gallon is going to be fine if all you're getting is some small fish because your permanent tank's a 10-gallon or whatever. So this is a 5.5 gallon. This is a stick-on thermometer. It's up to you whether or not you want a thermometer. I'm not heating this tank, so I don't care. I don't even remember when or why I put that thing on there. I might have bought it like that for all I remember. I don't know. But all that's in here, you'll see, you might be able to sort of see, I don't have anything on the bottom, like I said. No gravel, no glass stones, no sand, no nothing. Just the bare glass. That is the best thing for a quarantine tank. And the reason for that is a lot of the parasitic diseases, a lot of those parasites actually have a part of its life cycle takes place under your gravel. And that's where it'll grow or it'll hatch or part of the life cycle tends to take place in your substrate for a lot of your parasitic diseases. So if you don't have any substrate and you get one of those parasites in here on a fish, it's going to be a lot harder for that parasite to survive. It's also going to be a lot easier when you're vacuuming the tank and siphoning out the dirt. It's going to be a lot easier for you to see, just how much poop or uneaten food there is to make sure you get it all out, which means you will also be vacuuming out any parasite eggs or larvae that could be there. And another thing, as I mentioned, with being able to see the food, on the bare bottom, you'll be able to see any uneaten food, which will help you determine whether or not your fish are actually eating. Because some fish, they don't come to the surface to eat, they prefer to peck it off the ground. Sometimes the first couple of days are just too shy, so they'll only eat it off the floor. So the bare bottom lets you see whether or not your fish are eating or not, which is part of the reason why we quarantine. We want to make sure they're eating, we want to make sure they're healthy. The bare bottom will also let you see physically if there's anything abnormal with the fish's poop, or is there actually parasitic worms, crawling around the floor of the tank, indicating a problem. So trust me, you don't want anything on the floor of your quarantine tank. Why spend the money anyway? It's just a temporary house for medical purposes, right? As I mentioned, for decor, you just want some cheap stuff. Preferably smooth things, such as like plastic plants. They don't die or get turned colors as easily. Silk plants, if you put any kind of dye or colored medication in there, boom, ruined. Plant is ruined. The plastic plants don't really soak up dyes from medications as well. So chances are, if you gotta medicate the tank, you're not going to ruin the plastic plant, at least not as easily. So stick with plastic plants. If you can't find with weighted bottoms, almost any fish store asks for live plant weights. Many pet stores will give you 1 or 2 for free, or you can simply buy a pack and just weight down the ones like that. You can put a little bit of gravel in the tray of the plant to weight it down if you have to. The ones that I have in here are with a plant weight, or 2 of them actually have a suction cup on the end, so I just have it suction cupped to the glass. You can find plenty of plastic plants that actually have like stone or weighted bottoms to them. You find them mostly in the betta fish section, so check there. And then a little cave or something that you don't mind much about. I got a little, you probably can't see it at all from this angle, but I have a little miniature glass, Coke glass in there. I got it for 50 cents. So unpainted glass cups work. Go to a garden store and get a terracotta clay pot. So it's just the orange clay pots that don't have any glaze or paint or anything on them. They work great for quarantine tanks, and they don't cost a lot of money. They're really cheap, so if you get something real nasty in the tank, you're not losing a lot of money to just throw it away. I get a lot of my equipment secondhand from people, Craigslist, check there for a tank, and some old worn plastic plants or something like that you don't mind if they get wrecked. So it doesn't have to be anything too crazy. That's mostly all I use is the weighted plastic plants, glass cups, and terracotta pots. If you find some, you can use rocks if you want, like big rocks, but they don't really provide much shelter. You do need a place for your fish to feel safe, so you want some plant coverage. You do want a cave or 2 that they can hide into. However, a note with caves for your fish to hide in, you don't want those caves to be really deep. Like, you want to be able to easily see inside that cave so that you can check on a fish. Because a fish that's sick or not feeling well, they're often going to go and hide. So if you got a cave that's kind of odd shaped that they can kind of really get up in there and you can't see them at all, is going to be a problem in a quarantine tank. You want to have easy viewability of your fish just to make sure everyone looks normal and is acting normal. But at the same time, you're providing them some sort of cover. The clear glass, it works like a ghost house. Yeah, it's clear, I can see in it, but the fish understand there's a physical barrier above them and around them that nothing can get to them. So they still feel safe about it. And then I have a filter running back here. This is just a little air-drawn filter. You can do a sponge filter, which is an air-drawn type. This was like from a betta kit that's back here. You can do a regular filter. Again, this is, my big one has a filter that I got secondhand from somebody. It's got all kinds of white lime scale and whatnot on it. It looks horrible. It's by no means looks pretty. But I have that on the bigger one. You know, secondhand, didn't cost me much. Sponge filters work great. And speaking of which, a note with the filters, when you're doing the media for them, do not put any carbon in them. If you need to use medication in the tank, and I'm going to suggest that you do here in a moment, it's going to tell you to remove the carbon. So sponge, filter mesh, filter floss, filter cotton, that's it. That's it. So if you have have a filter that has the cartridges you put in, what that is filter floss on a plastic base with the carbon in the center. Do not do that. Do not. If you have one of those you want to use, great. Don't put the cartridge in it. Just shove some foam in there and turn it on. Honestly, it works the same. By one pump filter I have that uses a cartridge, I have the cartridge in there plus a whole bunch of foam shoved in behind and around it. Because that foam, the filter foam or floss, whatever, that's what is actually filtering out, and it's trapping your fish poop and the uneaten food. And that's where your cleaning bacteria, your good little friends, the nitrifying bacteria, are going to live, is there. So that's honestly the most important part in the filter. You can have ammonia chips if you feel the need, but no carbon in the filters that you use on a quarantine tank, because you're just going to have to take it out to medicate your fish anyway, so what's the point? Just do full sponge, nothing else. And you can literally buy something called a sponge filter. It's literally just a sponge on a base, and you click your bubbler right up to it, and that's it. Provides oxygen and filters the water at the same time, which is what this is. It's just shaped like a traditional filter. Like I said, but a regular filter does work as well. So that's filtration. Do cycle your quarantine tank before you actually go to the store and bring any fish home. I did a whole video about why you cycle a tank and how the nitrogen cycle works and quick ways to do it. I'm going to touch very briefly. What you're doing is get the tank set up. All you really need is water in your filter, and you got it running, and you want to leave it run for, a couple of days, a week. It depends on the size of your tank and what all you're doing. But the quickest way to get it cycled is to take water from your existing fish tank, which should have already been cycled and is healthy. Put that in your quarantine tank, at least half, and then fill it up with fresh. Take a dirty sponge out of one of your existing filters. You know, the sponge, how they get all black and brown and goopy and icky and gross. Take one of those, rinse it off a little bit, and in a bucket of water pulled from your tank. Do not run your sponges under tap water, because you kill everything on it. You're defeating the purpose. So take scoops of water out of your tank, put it in a bucket, just swish your sponge around in there to clean off some of the gook, and then put that in your new filter in your quarantine tank, or a tank you're trying to start up to get it going quicker. They also make these really awesome products called like Startzyme and stuff. I have Seachem Stability, which is the same thing, and this is essentially just a bottle of concentrated nitrifying bacteria and water. And you're cycling your tank to get these good bacteria in the water. And what these nitrifying bacteria do is they thrive on ammonia. That stuff that fish pee out that is very toxic for them to be swimming around in. I mean, let's face it, when somebody pees in the pool, you get right out, right? You don't want to be swimming in that. Well, neither do your fish. So when you're cycling a tank, you're trying to get those nitrifying bacteria in there, which love to eat ammonia. They munch on ammonia, they break it down, They turn it into nitrite, which is still kind of toxic to your fish, but not as much as ammonia. And then eventually turns that into nitrate, which is really not all that toxic to your fish at all. So, add some of these, startup design chemicals, put a dirty piece of sponge from an existing tank filter into your quarantine tank, and take water from an existing tank to get it going fastest before you do anything. So you do want to cyclate. You want to make sure you got that in there, or you're going to be introducing fish that might be sick to an unstable environment, which is going to cause them stress, which is, as I have mentioned, can already cause them to get sick or bring out an illness that they've been exposed to. So that's the basics of the setup and all that. Now, what you're going to do in quarantine, and I've touched on some of this during the time they're in quarantining, you want to look for visible signs that they're healthy. Their fins are up, they're not breathing real heavy, they're swimming around, they're active, they're eating. We want to make sure there's nothing odd. You don't get the white spots, which are ick, or fuzzy patches, like slime, anything out of the ordinary that would indicate a disease while they're in quarantine. Now I'm gonna adjust here. Let me let you in on a little secret here. Every single fish that you buy from a pet store, probably even your local private-owned pet stores, but definitely your big chain pet stores, have been exposed to any number of diseases. They are already infected, even if they look fine. And they can carry that to your existing fish in your tank if you don't quarantine them. They can get sick and show signs of illness a couple of days after you get them home because of the stress. Trust me, even if they look healthy, they have a problem. The number one thing that I've run into with stores is internal parasites. Because they're inside the body, you can't physically see, oh, this fish has parasites, like you can with ick. It's inside the body. And because these internal parasites want to feed off your fish, it's going to kill it very slowly. So it can take weeks, months even, for that fish to start showing signs that there is something wrong. Like, it stops eating. The color on your fish is suddenly pretty lackluster. It's not as active as it used to be. Maybe it's swimming funny, and eventually it dies. That's the number one thing that I encounter at pet stores, and it does take a while usually for your fish to show some outward signs that there is something wrong. So do what I do yourself a favor, just treat the fish for any number of pathogens when you get it while it's in quarantine. Just, you're basically making sure you're nipping anything in the bud before you show signs of it in the fish. Now that is actually a controversial subject. Some people will say, well, why expose your fish to medications and chemicals if they look healthy? That can in turn actually stress the fish to the point it kills it. However, like I said, if they're at the pet store, I guarantee you they've come in contact with internal parasites. They're probably infected. Just treat for it. That's how I feel. So like I said, there is a bit of a controversy. Now, if you're getting your fish directly from a breeder or a fish show or something like that where they have been properly raised in good clean water, good conditions, and they're not coming in contact with water that has all kinds of other fish in it, you're probably okay. But see, what happens is at pet stores, rows of tanks at a pet store are all hooked up to one giant filtration system. That means the water from the tank containing the neons down the right end is cycling through the tank of African cichlids down at the other end of the row. So fish species that would never come in contact with each other in the wild are, being introduced through the same water is flowing. So that means if you see a sick fish in tank A, fish all the way over in tank, Z has already been exposed to that illness that fish is carrying. All the water is going and coming from the same place for all those tanks. It's usually an entire straight section of tanks is on one system. So what's happening is, because these species that you wouldn't normally come in contact with each other are being exposed to water that has been exposed to a species, a foreign species, that means they're being exposed to foreign parasites, pathogens, diseases, parasites that fish would typically never ever encounter in the wild, which means that fish has had no chance to build any kind of resistance to that disease. So it's going to hit them pretty bad. And the chances of them catching it, pretty high. And it's going to affect them worse than the fish where it would be natively found. So that's why I say, chances are, your fish is sick and you just don't know it yet. And this is what I had in my tank, internal parasites. The first clue that you're going to notice for internal parasites is the fish is going to be pooping white, stringy poop. It's going to be white. And I don't mean, white specks. No, I mean white. Like, its poop is completely white, like dog poop when it's sat out in the sun for a couple of weeks. Yeah, snow white. Looks like they're pooping out whipped cream or something. That's a sign of internal parasites, because the parasites, it's typically a worm of some sort in the stomach or the intestinal tract, kind of like a tapeworm, is sapping all the nutrients from the fish. The fish can eat and eat and eat, but it's really not getting a lot of that nutrition from that food. If normal fish poop should be brown in color and not like super, you might see where it's, some spots where it's kind of thin and kind of stringy looking. That's caused by air bubbles, actually in the intestinal tract. Brown is the most important thing, and usually it's a good consistency or a good shape. I really don't know how to describe this without sounding really disgusting. So that's the number one sign that you have internal parasites. And I've seen this every single fish, every single different, name store. I have seen, white poop laying on the gravel, or fish pooping out white poop. And like I said, if you see one fish in one tank, they all have it. So what I do is I treat my fish for internal parasites. Usually once I can get them dewormed and get the parasites out of them, they do wonderful. Wonderful. There's a couple of things I do. I also want to, like I said, err on the side of caution, treating things that can have. I also treat for bacterial and fungal diseases, as well as parasites on the outside of the body, such as egg. So the first thing that I personally do is, after I bring them home and I've floated them in the tank in their bag, I open the bag. I may do this while they're floating too, but I open the bag and I'll clip it to the side of the tank so it can't roll over, and I add 1 drop of this. I don't know if you can see that or not. This is called Beta Revive Health Aid, and it is by Aquarium Solutions. This prevents and controls protozoan diseases, bacterial diseases, and fungal diseases. So, external parasites, bacterial, and fungal diseases. And this is actually a mixture of neomycin sulfate, methylene blue, which is gives it this lovely bright blue color that dyes your gravel and everything in your tank blue. Some kind of mixture, some buffers, malachite green, a very good antiparasitic, cyanobacillum, and electrolyte. So, you're sick, Doctor probably tells you drink some Pedialyte, drink some Gatorade, keep your minerals and your electrolytes up. Well, this contains electrolytes. It's kind of like Pedialyte for sick fish. I do a single drop of this. It is, oh, this stuff is pretty hard on the fish. At least the methylene blue portion is. The Victoria Green is not too bad. This particular concoction is not safe for invertebrates, and there's some questions. Some scaleless fish may react badly to it. So, but I do a drop of this, and I let them sit or soak, stay in the bag with this blue water from this medication for at least 10 minutes, and that is to kill any parasite like eggs or larvae you can't see that's actually on the body of your fish, to kill any bacterial or any fungal spores that are actually in the slime coat of your fish that they've come in contact with. So it's a really good preventative. I mean, they've probably been exposed to ick. You're nipping it in the bud before you start seeing those white spots. And when the fish starts having those white spots, the parasite is feeding on your fish. So this is just a treat for a broad range of things, to get it off their skin, off their scales, out of their slime coat, because they've come in contact with it. So that's what I do for the bacterial and fungal side of things. You can use this as, like I said, as a treatment. You can use actual sulfate medications for actual bacterial diseases. They make API, makes a fungal cure, stuff like that. If you do actually develop a problem that you need to treat, I don't really want to go through all the fish diseases because it's kind of stupid me explaining them to you. I will try to find a link to a pretty good, quick guide to common diseases, and put that link down below in the description so you can kind of try and match up what you have. And then once you know what it is your fish have, if you just go into the medication section of the store, of the aquarium store, and just start turning over boxes, you'll find things that says, oh, it treats this, and you go, oh, okay, I know that's what I'm treating, let's buy that. You know what I mean? So, but as I mentioned, the number one culprit here is internal parasites, and this lovely blue stuff doesn't treat internal parasites. There's very few things that treat internal parasites. The best way to kill an internal parasite is with an internal medication. So I use this. It's fish benzol. It's phenobenzol powder. It's the same thing that you find in dewormers for cats and dogs and horses. You use this on reptiles. It's a very broad spectrum anti-parasitic medication. It is extremely hard to overdose an animal on this. Extremely hard, so don't worry if you get a little heavy-handed with the medication. It's really hard to overdose anything on this. And like I said, it's broad spectrum, so it's going to kill most common internal parasites out there. And this is one of the few medications that also kills the eggs. Most medications cannot kill the eggs of parasites. This is one of the few that does. And all this is there's packets in here that contains a powder. And all you do is you take your food, whatever food it is your fish are eating, whether it's, frozen bloodworms or flakes, pelts, or whatever, you want to put it in a little container, sprinkle on some of this powder, read the directions. Honestly, these directions is like a lot of food to one whole packet, so you don't need much. Just enough to fit on the end of a butter knife, honestly. Is enough to treat like one pinch of food. And that's plenty. And then you're going to put a little bit of water in there, or personally what I like to use is garlic guard. This is a flavor enhancer, so it kind of helps cover up the taste of the medication for the fish. Water, garlic guard, something to make it a little wet. Stir in the powder, it's white, so you're going to kind of get like a milky, creamy kind of color. And then you let it soak, I believe the directions say for like 30 minutes, yep. Let it sit and to soak into the food for 30 minutes, and then feed the food to your fish, right? I mean, got an internal problem, best thing is an oral medication. Now, if you have a fish that is, oh yeah, I wanted to note too, this stuff, it is very hard on the stomach. It's hard on the stomach, and this stuff is actually used to kill invertebrates such as hydra, so do not use it with, you know, shrimps, clams, any kind of invertebrates or anything like that. It will kill them. And like I said, it's hard on the stomach, so if you got a fish food that says it contains probiotics, such as this Tetra Smart here, that is good because it'll help ease it up on the stomach. And you just do this, for 3 days, and you're done. That's it. Because it is hard on the stomach, I use it every other day instead of 3 days back to back. Personally, that's it. You're done. Now, if you do have invertebrates like shrimp, you need to treat. Scaleless. This stuff is okay for scaleless as long as it's being ingested and you're not mixing it in your water. It's fine for scaleless fish. Pro. It is an extremely gentle medication that you mix into your water. It doesn't make your water cloudy. It won't dye your decorations or anything like that. It's safe for invertebrates. It's safe for scaleless. Most fish can tolerate this, unless you got something really exotic. But for the most part, it's well tolerated by fish. It doesn't harm your biofiltration or kill those nitrifying bacteria we were talking about. So it's very good, and I've had a lot of luck with this medication. You can use this. This does flukes, tapeworms, flatworms. I don't know what that is. That word is tubularians, whatever. And you just mix 1 teaspoon per 20 gallons into the water. Remove your carbon, of course, as we already talked about, and you just let it sit for 1 whole week. Without water changes, you don't need to add any more, and after a whole week, you're done. What it does is, because it's in the water, all those new baby parasites that are hatching, boom, dead when they hatch, which is why you want to let it in there for a week without doing a water change or anything. And this is for freshwater or marine. It's really great. What I do, because this actually hits one group of parasites that the phenobenzol doesn't, is I'll do the medicated fish food for 3 days every other day, so it's almost about a week. I'll do 2 big water changes, and then I'll dose the tank with the Pro just to make sure that I'm killing any parasites that are maybe hiding in my filter, or kill any straggling behind parasites, or kill the parasites out of a fish that really wasn't eating very well, maybe because it is feeling very sick. Thanks to this stuff, this is the combo I used when I had the parasites, the worms, in my main tank. I had 5 German blue rams, and I managed to save the last one thanks to this. And that surviving ram is doing amazing. He eats like a pig. His poop is back to that normal brown I was talking about. He has hit maturity. He's getting really feisty. And man, the color coming in on this fish is amazing. So this stuff works. You could do just one or the other. You don't need to do the 2 combo like I do. If you do both, not at the same time. You never ever do 2 medications at the same time, ever. You do 1 medication as directed for the prescribed time. Do some big water changes, not 1 big water change in 1 day, because that'll really, really stress your fish, which could just make your problem worse. Do a couple of water changes, a little bigger than normal, to make sure you're getting all that other first medication out of the water, and then do the next one. So on and so forth. But this really worked for me. And you are going to have fish, don't be discouraged, you are going to have fish that die despite you doing this or treating it. It's going to happen. because sometimes they're already, even though they look healthy, they're already just too sick or too full of parasites for the medication to save them. But the ones that get through this okay usually go on to leave long, happy lives, and you don't have to worry about them making the rest of your tank sick. So I do suggest it. I swear by this. The fish that get through here usually do great for me, and I have them for a long time. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them and look for the other parts of the series. Alright?